Allow me to present myself. I'm Krell Voss, Senior Archivist of the Galactic Historical Society. I say this with considerable pride, as the sole Zoran ever to hold this position. One might assume that makes me special, however, that's hardly the case, especially when compared to humans. Even uttering the word causes my vocal sacs to resonate with a blend of awe, frustration, and that peculiar sensation they themselves would likely describe as being utterly perplexed. Coincidentally, this is precisely how most species felt about humans. Ambassador Torin once dubbed them the most insufferable saviors in the galaxy during an especially contentious Galactic Council session. She wasn't mistaken. Listen to me chuckle, because that's the crux of the matter with humans. They elicit laughter just before prompting you to question the very core of your existence. The Galactic Confederation had been in existence for almost 7,000 years before humanity stumbled onto the interstellar stage. Certainly, we had our disagreements. The Volturian hegemony and the Plodine alliance were perpetually on the verge of war due to some diplomatic incident. The Quantum Collective routinely flouted resource-sharing agreements, and the Mesic Trade Federation price-gouged everyone for essential medical resources. Yet, we persevered, we endured. We operated under established rules, traditions, and a pecking order that was universally understood. Then came the humans. Why became their preferred inquiry? Why do you conduct things in this manner? Why not explore this alternate approach? Why are you squabbling over that when you could share it? Why haven't you resolved this issue after a millennium? And, most perilous of all, why should we be concerned with your perspective? Here's what rendered humans exceptional: they weren't the most powerful, despite their high-gravity world affording them remarkable physical abilities. They weren't the most technologically advanced, the Quantum Collective surpassed them by centuries. They weren't the most numerous, attractive, or even the most conventionally intelligent. What they were was unpredictable, unclassifiable, and frustratingly adaptable. Most species specialize. The Volans are warriors, the Pleiadians are diplomats, and my people, the Zentans, are scholars and record keepers. Each species has its niche, its purpose, its predefined role within galactic society. Humans resisted definition. They could be warriors one moment, diplomats the next, then shift to merchants, then artists, then explorers, sometimes all contained within a single individual. It was infuriating. Jack of all trades, master of none, they would proclaim with those peculiar mouth contortions they term smiles, yet they never completed their own proverb, though oftentimes better than master of one. Their homeworld, Earth, such a simple designation for such a complex cradle of chaos, orbited an unremarkable star within an unremarkable spiral arm. However, within 3 centuries of achieving faster-than-light travel, humanity had become indispensable to galactic stability, not through conquest, not through overwhelming force, but through mediation, problem-solving, and mending what was broken. They connected dots that no one else perceived as related, and they executed it all with that unbearable air of, "Oh, was that challenging?" We simply deemed it obvious. The Galactic Council never quite knew how to handle them. Humans held only 17 worlds, a paltry sum compared to the thousands controlled by the major powers, yet their representative, Counselor Elena Novak, wielded influence that rivaled the VN High Commander. This was the state of affairs when it transpired. When humanity accomplished the one thing no one anticipated, they departed, and the galaxy quite literally held its breath. It commenced, as these matters often do, with a humanitarian crisis. Even our terminology became human-centric. Humanitarian, I should say sentientarian, but it lacks the same impact, doesn't it? The Mesic Trade Federation had been systematically strip-mining the outer colonies of Virtus Prime. Not their fault, they asserted, the colonial governor had signed the permits. The fact that millions of Virians were suffering from toxic air and poisoned water was, according to Mesic representatives, an unfortunate externality not addressed in the original agreement. Standard galactic politics, a routine occurrence. The strong exploit the weak, the council debates, nothing changes, except Counselor Novak rose during Session 7, 249b and played a recording, a simple recording of a Virian child struggling to breathe, her lungs failing from chemical exposure. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of labored gasping, devoid of commentary or dramatic music, simply suffering broadcast across the council chamber. Upon its conclusion, Novak surveyed the room and uttered 6 words, "We can fix this." You won't. The council erupted, the Mesic delegation stormed out, and the VUN High Commander threatened sanctions against Earth for emotional manipulation of diplomatic proceedings. However, that wasn't the incident, that was merely the prelude. The incident occurred the following day when 15 human medical ships arrived at Virtus Prime without council authorization, without Mesic permission, without any documentation whatsoever. They landed, deployed atmospheric scrubbers, treated the sick, and filtered the water. The Mesic Trade Federation responded by dispatching their security fleet. It's an invasion of sovereign territory, they declared. The humans possessed no warships, no defenses, merely doctors, engineers, and medical vessels. The Mesic opened fire. 3 human ships were destroyed, 2,417 human lives extinguished in an instant. The galaxy awaited Earth's military response, the fabled human vengeance we'd all heard about in their entertainment broadcasts, fire and fury. Instead, we received silence. 12 hours later, every human representative in every galactic institution simultaneously submitted their resignation. Every human corporation filed cessation of trade documents. Every human ship not already within another species' territory commenced its voyage home. No negotiations, no demands, no explanation, just 4 words delivered by Counselor Novak before she exited the council chambers for the final time: handle it yourselves. Then, the Volans laughed. They actually laughed. Cowards, High Commander Baz declared. They reveal their true nature when confronted with superior force. The Plodine Alliance smugly offered to fill the diplomatic void left by our emotional human friends. The Quantum Collective immediately commenced calculating how to exploit human technology patents now that Earth had withdrawn from the Galactic Intellectual Property Accords. None of them comprehended what had just transpired. None of them realized what humanity's absence would entail. I did. I'm a historian. I understand how civilizations fall. They don't collapse from external pressure, they collapse when their foundations erode from within. And humanity, whether anyone desired to acknowledge it or not, had become our foundation. The initial 48 standard cycles following humanity's withdrawal were characterized by smug satisfaction among the galactic powers. Good riddance became the unofficial slogan within the council chambers. The Mesic Trade Federation even commissioned commemorative holodisplays celebrating their victory over human imperialism. What fools we all were! By the 70th cycle, the first cracks began to appear. Remember those medical supplies the Mesic overcharged for? It turned out that 60% of their raw materials originated from human space. Within a month, prices tripled. Within 2, hospitals across 17 systems reported critical shortages. The market will adjust, Mesic Trade Minister Gloop announced, his gelatinous body rippling with what passed for confidence among his kind. New suppliers will emerge. They didn't. The Quantum Collective discovered something intriguing about those human technology patents they were so eager to exploit. The file designs worked technically, but they didn't work well. Crucial elements were missing, not deleted from the records, but apparently never documented in the first place. Humans are notoriously disorganized record keepers, Collective Overseer Prime declared. We will reverse engineer the missing components. They couldn't, because what no one understood about humans was that their true innovation wasn't in their documentation or even their technology, it was in their improvisation, their intuitive leaps, the manner in which Engineer Morgan could examine a malfunctioning warp core and declare, try bypassing the secondary flux capacitor, not based on any manual, but because it felt right. You can't reverse engineer intuition. The Pleiadian Alliance, meanwhile, discovered that filling the diplomatic void was more challenging than anticipated. At the first major summit without human mediators, trade negotiations between the Volans and the Zoran Academic Consortium, my people, broke down within hours. The Volturians stormed out, threatening military action over agricultural export quotas, agricultural exports, something humans had moderated successfully for decades with seemingly minimal effort. The humans relied on cheap emotional appeals and folksy wisdom, sneered Chief Diplomat Astra of the Pleiadians. We will implement a superior logic-based approach to galactic diplomacy. 3 weeks later, the Volans blockaded 2 Zoran research outposts. My cousin was stranded on one for 6 months over grain shipments. Worst of all was the vacuum of innovation. No one had realized how many cross-species scientific initiatives had been instigated and coordinated by humans. Collaborative research projects stalled, joint ventures collapsed. The annual Galactic Science Symposium, once the crown jewel of cooperative advancement, saw attendance drop by 70%. Human contributions were statistically insignificant, the quantum collective insisted, presenting charts and data models proving their claim. Yet, somehow, inexplicably, progress slowed across every field, from medicine to faster-than-light propulsion improvements. The Council, in its infinite wisdom, established a committee to address temporary market disruptions resulting from human isolationism. They projected a full recovery within one standard galactic year. I still possess that report in our archives. I keep it as a reminder of our collective hubris, because what followed wasn't recovery, what followed was collapse. By the end of the first galactic standard year, the power vacuum left by humanity's withdrawal had become impossible to ignore. Nature abhors a vacuum, humans used to say, as do ambitious alien civilizations. The Voan hegemony moved first, naturally, warrior cultures always do. They announced an emergency security initiative to maintain order in 3 sectors previously monitored by human peacekeeping forces. Within days, Voan dreadnoughts appeared over 6 worlds that just happened to control key resource nodes. Purely coincidental, High Commander Baz assured the Council, her fanged mouth twisted into what passed for a smile among her species. We merely wish to offer protection to vulnerable systems during this transitional period. Protection? Ha! Allow me to offer a translation from Valyrian diplomatic speak. These worlds are now ours. Object and discover what our new plasma cannons can do. The Council objected anyway, vocally and ineffectively. The Volturians simply activated their comms jammers during the proceedings and feigned transmission problems preventing them from hearing the complaints. Not to be outdone, the Pleiadian Alliance established what they termed administrative assistance outposts on 14 formerly independent trading worlds. Within weeks, those worlds found their trade policies mysteriously aligned with Pleiadian interests. Funny how that happens when foreign advisors control your communications network and planetary defense grid access codes. We merely offer our organizational expertise, Chief Diplomat Astra explained, her luminescent skin patterns displaying what xenolinguists identified as sincere helpfulness, but which any human child would have recognized as obvious lying. The Quantum Collective adopted a different approach. They simply ceased sharing their technological advancements altogether. Their representative announced they would reconsider participation in knowledge exchange protocols once the current regulatory uncertainty resolves. Meanwhile, the Mesic Trade Federation hiked prices on essential goods by 400%, claiming unforeseen supply chain disruptions. People starved, actual people, on 17 worlds. The Council sent strongly worded reprimands. The Mesic representatives read them, blinked their enormous compound eyes, and announced another price increase. And when the Rillian Compact attempted to establish alternative supply lines, 3 of their cargo ships mysteriously exploded. The Mesic expressed deep concern and offered to sell the Rillian's replacement vessels at only triple the standard market rate. Remember Virtus Prime, the world whose suffering had triggered this whole mess? Months after humanity's departure, the mining operations had expanded, the atmospheric contamination had worsened, and the Mesic had even begun harvesting the oceans, acidifying the water and destroying entire aquatic ecosystems. When Virian representatives begged for council intervention, the Pleiadians offered to draft a non-binding resolution expressing collective disappointment with the situation. The Volans suggested the Virians should fight their own battles if they wanted respect. The Quantum Collective calculated that the planet would remain minimally habitable for another 7 years and recommended gradual population relocation as the optimally efficient solution. Small conflicts erupted everywhere. The B and Hiso clans, whose 1,000-year border dispute had been successfully mediated by a single human diplomat named Beto Rodriguez, fell into open warfare over an asteroid belt containing trace amounts of platinum, 3 million casualties in the first engagement alone. The Soviet League and the Arcturian technocracy, whose trade relationship had flourished under human-designed tariff agreements, now imposed increasingly punitive restrictions on each other, leading to food shortages in 16 star systems. Even my own people, the Zentans, historically peaceful scholars, began fortifying our library worlds and restricting access to our databases. Knowledge must be protected in uncertain times, our Council of Archivists declared. The irony of hoarding information while claiming to preserve it was apparently lost on them. What had humanity done differently? How had they prevented this chaos for so long? The answer, I was beginning to suspect, wasn't that they were more powerful or more intelligent, it was that they were more stubborn, more principled, more willing to stand in the path of a stronger force and simply say no. And without that stubborn, principled presence, the galaxy was spiraling toward catastrophe. The breaking point. Then, 2 standard galactic years after humanity's withdrawal, the catastrophe we'd all been stumbling toward finally arrived. And oh, the magnificent irony of it. The crisis emerged not from any of the obvious flashpoints, not from Valuran expansion or Mesic exploitation, but from something so mundane that no one had bothered to consider it a threat: food distribution. Specifically, the collapse of the Pan-Galactic Agricultural Exchange Network. For centuries, this system had balanced food production and distribution across 177,000 worlds. Too much rain on Proxima? Ship the excess crops to drought-stricken Tau Ceti. Soil bacteria wiping out grain on Epsilon Eridani? Reroute protein supplements from the surplus on Barnard's star. Simple, logical, essential, and apparently impossible to maintain without humans. The first warning came when the automated routing systems for the Orion Arm Distribution Hub began showing anomalies. Shipments arrived late, some didn't arrive at all, others went to the wrong destinations. Minor algorithmic adjustments needed, announced the quantum collective technicians assigned to maintain the system. Optimization in progress. 2 weeks later, the entire network crashed. Not just communications, the actual physical infrastructure, transport vessels, automated harvesters, atmospheric regulators for hydroponic facilities, everything. Later analysis would reveal the cause: cascading failures triggered by seemingly minor programming changes. The Quantum Collective had attempted to improve efficiency by rewriting code originally designed by humans. They'd overlooked something called fault tolerance, redundancies that humans had built into the original system, inefficient subroutines that seemed pointless until the moment they weren't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the time, all anyone knew was that 37 billion sentients across 842 worlds faced imminent starvation. The Council convened an emergency session that lasted 17 straight days. I attended as the official historian, watching in a combination of horror and morbid fascination as the greatest minds in the galaxy proved utterly incapable of working together. The Pleiadians proposed a complex resource-sharing agreement that would have taken months to implement. The Volans suggested military-enforced rationing, with the strong naturally receiving priority. The Quantum Collective presented a utilitarian calculation demonstrating which populations could be sacrificed to save others, complete with colorful charts. The Mesic Trade Federation offered to address the crisis for a modest fee, only 200% of the affected world's total economic output for the next 50 years. Through it all, the empty human delegation seats loomed like an accusation. An unofficial delegation from Virtus Prime, now essentially a dying world, stood up during the proceedings. Their speaker, a frail female named Thella with visible breathing apparatus, addressed the council with surprising strength. 2 years ago, humans offered us help without conditions. You drove them away. Now we all suffer. Perhaps it's time to admit our mistake. The Volturian High Commander laughed so hard her ceremonial armor rattled. You suggest we beg the humans to return? Impossible. They're weak. They ran away when challenged. They abandoned their responsibilities. The Pleiadian chief diplomat nodded in agreement. The humans clearly cannot handle the complexities of galactic politics. Their emotional decision to withdraw proves their unsuitability for continued participation in our civilized community. The Mesic trade minister's body rippled with amusement. Even if we wished for their return, why would they come? What could we possibly offer them? They all missed the point, so spectacularly that I broke protocol and started laughing. Every head in the chamber turned toward me, the supposedly neutral Zentorian historian now cackling like a madman in the observation gallery. Apologies, I gasped when I could speak again, but you still don't understand humans at all, do you? They didn't leave because they were weak, they left because they were strong enough to walk away. They didn't abandon their responsibilities, they forced us to face ours. Silence fell over the chamber. Even the Voin looked uncomfortable. And what would bring them back? I continued, unable to stop myself. Nothing we could offer them, nothing except the one thing we've never given them, respect. The acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, they understood something about galactic civilization that the rest of us missed. The council secretary banged his ceremonial staff, reminding me that historians were to observe, not participate. I sat down, my point made. The debates resumed, the solutions proposed grew increasingly desperate. A Reagan scientist suggested placing billions in cryostasis until food production could be restored. A Zentorian philosopher recommended voluntary population reduction through mass suicide rituals. Meanwhile, the death toll began to mount, first thousands, then millions. Entire ecosystems collapsed. Refugee ships overwhelmed stable worlds. The Volans began firing on vessels that approached their territories without authorization. The galaxy was not merely facing a crisis, it was facing extinction. And somewhere out there, those 17 human-controlled worlds continued their silent vigil, neither helping nor hindering as we destroyed ourselves. The return. The message came as the Council entered its 32nd consecutive day of emergency session. By then, the Grand Chamber was a shadow of its former glory. Attendance had dwindled. Representatives argued in hoarse voices, exhaustion evident in every species' particular manifestation of fatigue. The Voin delegation had taken to wearing their full battle armor, threatening violence against anyone who opposed their increasingly draconian solutions. The message itself was simple, 5 words broadcast simultaneously to every communications system in Council space: we need to talk. Neutral ground. No signature, none needed. Everyone knew who it was from. The coordinates attached specified a location in unclaimed space, a small, unremarkable space station orbiting a nameless brown dwarf star, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't specifically looking for it. The Council debated for exactly 12 minutes before agreeing to send representatives. Not from any sudden burst of wisdom, mind you, pure desperation drove them. When you're drowning, you don't question the hand that reaches for you. I wasn't officially invited, but I managed to secure passage on the Pleiadian diplomatic vessel as historical consultant. Sometimes being the galaxy's most boring species has its advantages. No one expects the librarian to cause trouble. The station was austere, functional, a single conference room with a round table, no ornamentation, no luxury, just enough chairs for each delegation. And there they were, 3 humans, not the high-ranking diplomats or politicians everyone expected, not Counselor Novak or any recognizable official. Just 3 ordinary humans: Javier Rey, agricultural engineer; Bono, logistics specialist; Raj Patel, network systems designer. The Volan High Commander was apoplectic. You send technicians to meet with the leaders of the galaxy? This is an insult beyond tolerance. Javier Rey, a weathered man with lines around his eyes that suggested both frequent smiles and frequent frowns, shrugged in that distinctly human way. We're not here to talk politics, we're here to talk food distribution. That's the problem, right? People are starving. The political ramifications must be addressed first, insisted the Pleiadian chief diplomat. Proper protocols established, authority structures confirmed. Bono, her dark skin contrasting with startlingly pale eyes, actually laughed. People are dying right now. You want to talk org charts while they starve? The Mesic trade minister rippled indignantly. The economic considerations cannot be overlooked. Resource allocation requires comprehensive profit assessment to ensure sustainability. Raj Patel, a slight man with quick hands that never seemed to stop moving, cut him off. Here's the deal. We brought the original code for the distribution network. We brought the bypass protocols. We brought 50 of our ships already loaded with emergency supplies. We can have food moving again within 72 hours. And what do you demand in return? The Quantum Collective representative asked, suspicion evident in their harmonic voice patterns. The 3 humans exchanged glances. It was Javier who spoke again. 3 things. First, immediate cessation of all mining on Virtus Prime and full ecological restoration efforts. Second, an independent oversight committee for the agricultural exchange with representatives from every affected world, not just the major powers. He paused. The entire room leaned forward. Third, he paused, an acknowledgement, a simple admission that you were wrong. That the galaxy works better when we all work together. Chaos erupted. The Volans threatened war. The Pleiadians cited ancient diplomatic precedents preventing such admissions. The Mesic calculated financial ruin if mining on Virtus Prime ceased. Through it all, the three humans sat quietly, waiting, not arguing, not pleading, just waiting. Finally, as the shouting reached its peak, a new voice cut through the noise. The Virian representative, Thela, her breathing apparatus wheezing slightly. "I acknowledge it," she said. "On behalf of my world, we were wrong. The galaxy works better when we work together." One by one, representatives from smaller worlds joined in, the Rillians, the Zentans, my own people, even a junior member of the Pleiadian delegation, earning a glare from her superior. The humans nodded, satisfied. Raj pulled out a data tablet and began explaining the technical specifics of restoring the network. Bono outlined the logistics of emergency distribution. Javier detailed the agricultural recovery timeline. No grand speeches, no declarations of victory, just solutions, practical, immediate, life-saving solutions. The major powers eventually conceded, though they called it a mutually beneficial arrangement rather than an admission of error. The humans didn't seem to care what it was called as long as the work began. Within a week, food shipments resumed. Within a month, the death toll plateaued. Within 6 months, a new equilibrium established itself, different from before, but stable. Humanity had returned to galactic affairs, but on new terms. They maintained their 17 worlds as independent